Welcome back. When you do professional photo shoots or videos, you use professional equipment, big giant cameras with big giant lenses. But when you're traveling around town and you're just having fun, or you're on vacation, or you're just kind of, wandering about and there's no real purpose or mission, and but you want to have a camera with you at all times, and you want it to look cool when you do take a picture, that's when the smaller, lighter cameras come into play, and you don't want to lug a big, giant, heavy camera along. So that's what this video is about. What is the smallest, and this is my challenge, this is always my challenge, is what is the smallest camera that I could possibly have with me at any time in my coat pocket or something, and if I see something really cool, I want to take it out and take it, but I want to have like the blurry background that gives it that really cool look. That's actually my main thing, is how can I get that blurry background? And that is the biggest factor that makes me decide what equipment I use. Is I don't care how big the picture is, I don't care how many megapixels it has and all that, can it make a blurry background? So that's what I'm going to show you today. What is the smallest, tiniest little camera that you could possibly have with you? There are small cameras that you can put a big lens on. That's not going to count. I want the smallest lens with the smallest camera. And all of these, by the way, that I have today can shoot 4K video, which is a big thing for people nowadays. I still do everything at 1080p, but 4K is the big thing now. Anyway, so yeah, these all do 4K, except one. So let's start with the borderline stuff. These are not compact cameras, but they're the smallest of the big cameras, and I thought it was important that I include them. These are the revolutionary cameras that showed how small a full frame camera can be. Full frame is the biggest sensor you can get, which gives you the blurry background, and you can interchange lenses on it, but they're still kind of big. Is the Sony A7 line. The whole A7 line is pretty much the same size. The original A7 is the smallest of all of them, and I still use it. I love it. It's the lightest and the smallest one. This is the borderline. This is like, it's still kind of big and bulky, but it's the smallest of the professional cameras that you could possibly take with you. There are big lenses. I mean, you put a bigger, longer lens, you're going to get blurry backgrounds, but I want the smallest lenses possible. So that's what this is here. And I'm going to go for the biggest to the smallest. I'm going to leave the best for the last. The basic A7, just the original basic A7 that started the whole thing, is still great. I still use it. The A7, the A7S, and the A7R run for about $1,000. The A7 III is about $2,000, and the A7R3 is almost $3,000. So that's kind of expensive for people that just want a little pocket camera they can take along with them. But if you've already got one, the smallest lenses that give you blurry backgrounds, my favorite ones are, and the most professional one of all is the Zeiss 85 1.8. It's about $1,200, so that's not really that inexpensive. Then you have this one, heavy as hell. It's a Mitakon Zhongyi 50mm 0.95. This is about as blurry of a background as you could possibly get. This thing weighs a ton. This is not my choice for taking around town. It's about $800. It's heavy. My favorite one of all on the A7 is the Voigtlander 40mm 1.2. It's a great lens. It's manual, so it's not autofocus, but this is just a charm to hold in your hand. It's the right size. Look at this. This is not very big. It's kind of lightweight. The Voigtlander is $1,000. It's not cheap. I think it's German or Austrian. Great lens. Just if you get this, it's worth the money. When you push the shutter button halfway down, you get the focus enlargement, which you don't get with some of the other lenses. It's just worth it. It's a great investment. I love it. I just love the Voigtlander. The one other A7 that I suggest is the Sony 55 1.8. It's a small lens. It's autofocus. It focuses really fast. It's lightweight. It's small. Cute little camera. It also costs $1,000, but it's probably the most versatile all-purpose lens you could have. It's a great lens. It's sharp. It's fast, and it works really good. It's like a good all-around lens. As far as full frame goes, I would say the Sony 55 1.8 for just an all-around autofocus. If you don't want to think, you just want to point and shoot, that's the way to go. If you want something that looks a little cooler, I'd say the Voigtlander 40 1.2. So that's the full frame setup. Moving down to the APSC, which is a smaller sensor, so it has to work a little harder to get the blurry background, but it still gets really great effects, is the Sony 6300. The 6300 or they now have the 6500. They're about $1,000. You could actually take the Voigtlander and put it on the 6300. Putting a full frame lens on an APS-C camera makes the lens longer, so the 40 is now, what, 70? 80, something like that, but it still gives you that great look. A good starting lens is the Sony 51.8. This is a great lens. Look how small this is. This is an autofocus, fast, sharp Sony lens that goes on a Sony camera. They're made for each other. It gives you decent blurry background. It's not that bad. The Sony 51.8 is only about 300 bucks. And for a little wider angle, you can get the Sigma 30mm 1.4, which is also about $300. But my favorite lens to pair with the 6300/6500 is the Rokinon. It's not an autofocus lens, but boy, does this thing give you blurry backgrounds. This thing is great. It's about twice as heavy as the Sony 50, but big difference in how it looks. This is a manual lens. You really got to stay steady and focus really well. But hey, look, it's not that much bigger. For a small camera, it gives you really impressive pictures with blurry background. This is my favorite pairing of the 6300/6500 is the Rokinon 50mm 1.2. It's about $400. It's manual. It's a great lens. That's my kind of cutoff for the bigger cameras. Now we're getting into the small ones, the compact cameras. The king of the hill is the Sony RX1R. This is a full frame sensor, the biggest sensor you can get, with a 35mm lens permanently attached to it. As it goes down to f2, this is not a cheap camera. The RX1R is $3,300. This is, again, a full frame, 4K, super sharp camera. You can do video stills. The screen flips like that. It doesn't flip around, unfortunately, so it's kind of hard to do selfies, but I still put this thing on a selfie stick sometimes. It weighs a ton, it's heavy. It has its quirks on how you focus and everything. I know it sounds funny, but I recently filmed a cooking video with it. I actually mounted this thing to a jib arm. This is probably the smallest camera ever mounted to a jib because I needed a 35mm and I just like the look of the blurry background in the kitchen. So it worked really well. This little camera worked really well for that. It has a hot shoe, audio input, and HDMI output. I hooked up a monitor to the HDMI output so I could see what I was doing. And I accidentally had it set on 120 frames per second, which is ridiculous. So it started to overheat after about 20 minutes. But it did really good up to there. And then I had to set it down to 30 frames per second.
The only thing like it is the Leica Q, which costs even more at $4,500. And the RX1R has more features than the Leica Q. The RX1R has a 35mm, which is more practical, whereas the Leica Q has a 28mm wide-angle lens, which in my opinion is way too wide for me to do people, and wide-angle lenses do not make as much of a blurry background. So for me, the RX1R is a much better choice than the Leica Q.
It's expensive. Most people probably aren't going to get it because it's almost $3,500. Most of you are going to say, well, I don't have that kind of money. No problem. I'm going to show you now what you can afford. And these are just the cutest little cameras in the world, and I'm really, really happy with them. Now, first of all, before I get to the big reveal of my favorite little tiny camera, it gives blurry backgrounds, people are going to say, what about all these little true pocket cameras? What about those? The only way you're going to get a blurry background with a tiny little compact camera like this is either if you're shooting a small object and you're really close to it, then yeah, you're going to get a blurry background. But most of what I do is pictures of people. So you got like at least from here to here, or even full body, or headshot, whatever. You have to go telephoto on this and step back quite a ways. You might be able to get somewhat of a blurry background in certain situations. You can hold an ND filter in front of it maybe to force it or cheat it, but you're not going to get that really impressive blurry background that I love. So anyway, here we go. Panasonic's the winner here. Trust me, I have been looking for these cameras. I wanted the smallest camera possible that you can change lenses on that gives you blurry background. So here we go. Ready? It's the PanasonicLumix GX850. Look at how tiny this thing is. It's a great retro looking camera. It has a flip screen. Get this, the flip screen goes all the way up so you can take selfies and things like that, blogging. It even has a flash on it. It takes bursts of 4K pictures. It shoots in 4K. It doesn't have a electronic viewfinder, an EVF. So that's the only drawback to this. You have to kind of trust that it knows what it's doing, and it does great. The lens, my favorite, this lens blew me away. I actually got this lens by accident. It just happened to come with another thing that I bought on eBay, a movie camera, and it came with this lens, and I put it on here. It's a micro 4/3. This is a micro four thirds camera with this lens. It's an Olympus 45 1.8. Doesn't sound super impressive, but my God, the pictures that I take with this thing are almost on par with the GH5 using the 42.5 lens. This is a $2,000 camera, and this lens is over $1,000. Here you can see side-by-side comparisons of the same picture taken with a GH5 and the GX850. Notice how similar the background blur is, even though the lens on the GX850 is only 1.8 and the GH5 is 1.2. This giant, big, heavy, professional setup, and the GH5 is the big camera that a lot of people are using for doing professional videos and shoots. This little tiny camera, they both have the micro four thirds sensor, the same mount, so I can take this giant lens from the GH5 and put it on the little tiny 850. Look at this, this is ridiculous. But it takes the same, the pictures, it's the same. This is the same result. But I don't want a big giant lens on a tiny camera. That's the whole point of getting a tiny camera. So I have a tiny lens. This little tiny lens here takes pictures almost the same as this giant lens here. And that is where the fun starts. This little tiny lens is also autofocus, and it's one of the fastest autofocusing lenses. You go, I mean, it focuses almost instantaneously. It's brand new, it just came out, so it's got so much intelligence to it. You know, when you're a professional photographer and you're all about doing everything manual, you get kind of scared putting something on auto, even though it has manual settings and you can do things manually. I learned to trust this little thing. I put it on portrait mode and just go click, 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 and it focuses, it knows what, it has the right exposure, it does everything right. It knows what to focus on, it recognizes a face. I put ND filters out it and I go outside. I recently filmed a YouTube video out in the desert and I wanted as little equipment as possible. So I took this little tiny camera, a little tiny tripod, a little tiny reflector, and a little tiny portable audio recorder. Set it on the tripod, and I'm really happy with how this thing turned out. I mean, I just can't say enough about this camera, and it's cheap. The camera is like 500 bucks. This is an Olympus M Zuiko 45 millimeter. It only costs like 250 bucks. 250 bucks for this little thing. So for 700 bucks, you got yourself an amazing camera that when you get to know this camera, the pictures are really impressive. If you want a little bit of a wider lens, then I suggest the Lumix 25 1.4. It's $600. They also have a 1.2, but it's like $1,000. I love this little camera so much, I bought several of them. As a matter of fact, I'm filming this right now with one of them. It's the GX850 with a 45 millimeter Olympus 1.8. That's what you're watching me on right now. This says no viewfinder, no hot shoe, and no audio input, but I don't care. I record all my audio separately anyway, and I don't need a hot shoe because I'm not going to use strobes with a little around the town pocket camera. This is just a little camera I carry around in case there's a cool picture to take. The only camera that's this small that has a rangefinder, electronic viewfinder, EVS on it, they don't make it anymore. It was called the Panasonic GM5. You might be able to find one on eBay, but for brand new cameras, this is, I mean, I've been looking high and low for the tiny camera that does blurry backgrounds that's just fun to take with you, not a heavy brick. This is it. There's also a 45 millimeter 1.2, but it's over $1,000. These lenses also go on the GX85, which has an electronic viewfinder. The GX85 is $600. It's a little bit bigger. The GX8, which is, I have one of those. I love the GX8. It's bigger, but it's a great camera to have. I love how the viewfinder flips up so you can look into it. This is $600. It's a great price for a great camera. These are all micro four thirds. GX9 just came out, $900. The G9 is $1,300, but it's not small. And the GH5, of course, $2,000. It's a great professional camera, but again, this is full size. It's not small. As far as keeping it small, lightweight, and cheap, this is the way to go.
Here's a little montage of pictures I've taken with this cute little camera in the short time that I've had it. It's just so much fun. It's so lightweight and small, and it's just so much fun to just take wherever I go. After working with all these heavy cameras all the time, it's such a pleasure to have this lightweight, tiny little thing that takes amazing, beautiful pictures.
I hope this inspired you. This is if you guys know a smaller camera that makes blurry backgrounds, let me know. But from what I've found that's out there right now, and I'm not talking about old things, you know, from 10 years ago. I'm talking about things that are out right now. All of these can do 4K video, except for the original A7s. They take really great pictures, and they have all the new features of focusing and everything. This is what I use, and you can see I go through a lot of cameras. I go through a lot. I buy whatever comes out. I mean, the newest thing. If this little camera can do what this one does, I'm going to use this one when I'm just walking around town. Of course, if you're doing professional photo shoot in a studio, you might want to use this. It's big, it's heavy and everything. This is my little pal. This is my buddy now. Check it out if you can. To help you, I've included below a chart of pictures taken with every lens and camera that I've mentioned, so you can compare and see how blurry the backgrounds are and what they look like and what the prices are and all that kind of stuff down below in the description. I know people are going to say, well, there's a 1.4, there's a 1.2. Yeah, they're bigger, they're heavier. That's not what this video is about. It's about making things small and lightweight. So I hope this helped. See you in the next video, and I give a lot of free stuff away. Some cameras, some lenses that I just don't use much, I just give them away. So keep watching this video, tell your friends about Marcus Picks. I'll see you in the next video.